The walls of my apartment are completely bare, and that's okay. I pretty much wear the same clothes every day, and right now I don't have an issue with that. I also randomly don't own oven mitts. I use my kitchen towel. These are some areas in my life where partaking in consumerism or overconsumerism doesn't really move the needle for me. To be fair, I reserve the right to change my opinions in the future, but given my priorities right now and the fact that I am constantly moving in my 20s, it just doesn't make sense for me to buy more things than I need. So for the last 500 days, I have been partaking in a low buy experience. I don't find it hard for myself because I have a system of questions I quickly ask myself each time I approach buying something new. Today, I'm going to share with you what that system is so that you can rethink your spending and focus on purchases that truly add value to your life. Because the reality is, having an easy system to fall back on takes the effort out of figuring things out. This works in pretty much every area in my life, regardless of whether it's household items or beauty products or shoes, accessories, anything, you name it. I call it my guide to stopping overconsumption. Going through these steps only takes about 1 to 2 minutes in my mind. By the way, I'm Carly. On this channel, I talk all things personal finance, living intentionally, and I also talk about the business side of modeling. So if any of those videos interest you, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my videos. I also launched a newsletter where I go more in depth into my thoughts behind the videos I create. So check out the description box for more information. Getting right into it, our first step in our guide is figuring out our gap analysis. What gap will this item solve? When you see an item you want to buy, are you replacing something or are you simply buying a trendier version of an item that already serves a purpose in your home? So another way to think about this is if you're thinking of buying something new, whether that's a phone or a bag, what existing gaps in your life will this item fill that your current things at home just don't provide? And also, what happens if you just don't buy this item now or ever? Will you continue to experience that gap? And if you've determined that this gap is real, then we'll move on to the next step, which is to utilize what you have and or borrow what you can. Often we think we need something when in reality, we have something at home that already works just fine to meet our needs. Or we have something that can be repurposed to work fine, or we can just borrow something from a neighbor or a friend. If your gap is a one-off scenario where you need something, can you borrow the item or maybe even rent the item for cheaper than it would cost to buy the new item? Our communities and even no-buy groups on Facebook can be particularly helpful in this area. And that brings us to the next step in our guide, which is is it enough? Does what I already have or what I can borrow get the job done? And if it does, why do I feel so compelled to buy something else? After years of examining and learning from my personal buying habits, I realized that when I'm bored with what I have, buying that new thing isn't a long-term solution. Eventually, in 1 week or 2 weeks, that feeling will come around again because there will always be something new for me to buy. And generally, I've realized that when I want to buy something I don't need, that means it's time for me to start hanging out with my friends or take myself out on a day trip somewhere. Basically get my mind out of shopping mode. After years and years of going through the cycle feeling like I don't have enough, when I truly looked back at when purchases made my life better, I could only think of 2 specific scenarios. And the first one was when I got my keyboard phone with unlimited texting when I was 12. And then the second one was years later when I moved into my very first apartment all by myself and I had a whole refrigerator to myself. And the funny thing is now I have a touchscreen phone that can do so much more than unlimited texting. I also currently have my own fridge. That's all to myself. And these are luxuries that I don't even give a second thought to on the daily. I think it's human nature to take these things for granted because we adapt hedonically, which is to say our level of happiness eventually goes back down to a baseline level, regardless of the changes in our lives. So going back to our guide, now it's time to decide on our essentials. If we find that we need something or we simply want something, what's the core part of what we actually need versus the nice to have? Because we will always be given the opportunity for upgrades. So this is an opportunity for you to ask yourself, what is the bare minimum that you need to fulfill the gap that you see for yourself? And maybe another thing to consider is, can you mix what you already have to fulfill your need or want? One example of deciding on the essentials for me is buying a journal. As you can tell, I am somewhat of an avid journaler. I go through one journal maybe every few months. Every time it's time for me to buy a new journal, I'm tempted to not only just buy the journal, but also look at the new pens or look at the stamps or the stickers. Stationery stores give me a lot of inspiration. I think at some point in the future, those things will serve me, but because those things aren't a priority for me right now, I am usually able to walk away with just a journal. And really the function that serves for me is just to spend some time with myself, reflect on my life currently, and it's a way for me to just keep a time capsule. And right before you pull the trigger, you're going to evaluate the long-term impact that this purchase will have. How will you continue using this item regularly? How much time and energy will it take to maintain this thing? Will it actually be worth keeping long-term, as in it won't be deprecated because newer versions of this item will come out, therefore making it obsolete. One example of a long-term impact thing that you would want to consider is buying a cashmere sweater. Not only do you have to store it a certain way, but you'll probably also have to get it dry cleaned seasonally. Are you prepared to spend the time, money, or energy to do that? Does the sweater have a trendy silhouette or color that would make you less likely to wear it in 2 seasons? I know that this overall framework sounds quite extensive, but honestly, you can go through this really quickly in just a couple of minutes. But here's the thing, if you feel like you're constantly being pulled to purchase things, either by ads, through your shopping apps, or even being influenced by friends, I think one quite low stakes area to practice this framework of guide is through grocery shopping. Every time you go to the store, you probably have your consistent staples that you repurchase week after week. You might also have existing food at home in your cupboards, or even produce in your fridge that might spoil. Before you grocery shop, you inevitably have to figure out the gaps that you currently have. Take a note of what you already have in your kitchen that can be used for meals for the week. And you figure out, is what I have enough? Then decide on other essential items that you want to add to your list. You might also consider the long-term impact of what you buy, like how you will use certain spices or ingredients for a specific recipe you want to make. How will you use that up before it goes bad, or store it so that you can use it later? When I have certain things that have been sitting in my cupboard or my freezer for weeks or months, I make myself use it up. Because after all, at some point, I bought these ingredients with the intention of using them, so I might as well use them. Time and time again, I'm always surprised at how much money I save on my weekly grocery haul when I use the items in my cupboard, which of course makes sense, but I don't know, sometimes I just forget that. Cutting back on consumerism can be really difficult. It's easy for our default to be in the mode of buying when everything around us seems to make purchasing things so seamless. I often keep in mind that when I have fewer things, I don't have to take care of them. They don't take up space in my home, and I don't have to spend time and energy thinking about how I will get rid of them when I will no longer use them anymore. And at the same time, in many cases, I can only consume one thing at a time. I can only wear one pair of jeans at a time. I can only wear one pair of shoes at a time. So for clothes, for example, beyond having all of my bases covered for the different occasions I might have, collecting more items beyond that threshold just doesn't make sense for me right now. So next time you're thinking of buying something new, think of this guide. What is the gap you're trying to fill? Can you utilize what you already have or borrow from a friend if it's a one-off need? I ask to borrow things and I lend things all the time. Is what you already have enough? And if you will buy something new, consider deciding on what the essentials are and cut out the rest. And then evaluate the long-term impact of this purchase. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also comment down below how you see yourself using this guide. Cutting down on overconsumption on one-off items is an incredible start. The next step to consider is to not fall prey to lifestyle creep, which I talk much more in depth about in this video right here. So check it out next.